And I thought, it's money. I mean, I can get more of that, but I don't know if that's going to make me feel better. And I was going through these things and I just kept listing stuff and thinking, well, I've tried that. It's not working. I've tried that. It's not working. I've tried that. It's not working. And I finally came to this place where I thought, okay, this is all there is. And if this is all there is, I'm not going to keep doing this. And I'm a fairly radical person in my personality. Like I'd probably calm down a little bit because I'm 40, but I just decided then and there, it was like as black and white. It was like so obvious to me, I should kill myself.
Alrighty, welcome on back, folks. This is Tough Love, Tough Testimonies, as it were. I am joined tonight by a friend of mine and pastor of the church that I am currently attending in Ogdensburg, New York. This is Greg Hurlbut. Greg, thank you so much for joining me tonight.
So good to be joining you, Eric. Appreciate you inviting me on.
Yes, we were talking a little bit before the show, folks, and I was telling Greg about how much the response has been from the community in the positive side of the spectrum with regards to the testimony series that I've been doing. People have been finding it very encouraging and have been being blessed in general by it. Awesome. Tonight we're getting into Pastor Greg's testimony. As I did mention just briefly there, I'm currently attending NTC Ogdensburg over here in the great state of New York. I got the website pulled on up here. If anybody is interested to learn a little bit more about Pastor Greg and the work that he does, you can check him out over here. He shepherds a flock, not just in Ogdensburg, New York, but also over in Messina as well. So sometimes he's sliding in towards the end of worship to make sure he's in for the 11 o'clock service where we are.
Yep.
And him and his wife are in leadership over there, and they do an outstanding job. So I am fond of saying, folks, that the words of a person's testimony can oftentimes be just as compelling and just as meaningful as the scriptures themselves.
Yep.
And if the Bible has anything to say about it, we are told in the book of Revelation, chapter 12, that this is not just the blood of the Lamb, but by the word of the Holy One's testimony, Satan is conquered and defeated. And in much the same vein, Matthew 5:16 tells us that we are to let our light shine before men, that they may see our good works and give glory to our Father who is in heaven. So that's what we are here to do tonight.
That's right.
We hope that you take something valuable away from this. And as I've mentioned before, folks, I'm interested in hearing what you have gone through. I'm interested in hearing your testimony. So for anybody out there who would like to share it, please send that on over to my podcast email. I'd love to get it heard on here, maybe have on the show to talk about it. But without further ado, we are getting into the saga of Greg Hurlbut. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share, folks. So, Greg, you and I, we've known each other now for a little over a year.
Yep.
And I got to hear your testimony actually in church one Sunday, and I found it to be very, very compelling. And specifically for a lot of the listeners that I've had who reach out to me privately behind the scenes, who say, I was walking this atheistic path before I found your channel, or I was very much a skeptic, but the things that you share have really made me dive deep into the Bible. I feel like it's going to be very, very impactful for them. So, the floor is yours, sir. Tell me a little bit about your life before you were a Christian and leading up to that monumentous event.
Yeah. So again, thanks for having me on the show, Eric. I really love sharing the story of God's work in our lives. We call it testimony. We use that language, but it's really just the story of God working in the world and then how he does it individually in each and every one of us. And so all of those stories are unique, but they're always incredible to hear how God works. And so, I love sharing my story, my testimony of coming to Jesus. Mine's a little bit different in the sense that I grew up in the church. I knew God was real. I even went to a Christian school up until 6th grade. Then I went to regular junior high and high school. And probably around 10th grade is when things kind of went awry for me, I guess I should say. And really, what took place was I had some tragedy happen in my life, right? So I think, what happens as a young person is you kind of have these naive ideas of how life's going to go. You're always idealistic, right? Everything's going to be wonderful.
Yep.
And then difficult things happen. And it's probably one of the core struggle still for most people who would be Christians, or even people who would maybe not know God or wondering if God is even real, is if he is real, why do bad things happen? Right? Like,
Mm.
man, it's just one of the core hard things to walk through in life. Okay, here I am in a world where people say God is real. If he's real, why did my father get cancer and die? Why did I suffer abuse at the hands of someone else? Why did these things happen that didn't, in a sense, deserve to happen in my life? And so I faced one of those. About 10th grade, we had a young man living in our home, and he just grew up with us. He was going to college with my brother, and it was kind of closer to live with us than he did, but he was closest family, right? Like, it lived with us for a few years, and he died tragically in a
Oh
hunting
man.
accident. Yeah, on Thanksgiving Day for all days, right?
Wow.
And I remember I was 16 years old, and I remember when it happened. There was a lot of details around it, but when it happened, I just couldn't wrap my mind. This guy was a leader in our church. He was a mentor kind of in my life, a brotherly figure. We had obviously grown close to him because he lived in our home with us. And here he dies from just a tragic gun accident, in the woods during a hunting thing. And I couldn't wrap my mind around it. I just couldn't. I thought, this doesn't make sense. He's good. He does all the right things. He loves God. Why would he die? It doesn't make sense to me. And I wrestled with it for a few months, really. um kind of going back and forth. I knew God was real. I had experienced enough to know, okay, I believe God's real. He's not just not out there. There's not nothing. But what happened about 3 months after this person's death was actually, it's a bizarre story. His girlfriend was killed in a car accident.
Oh
So
jeez.
he dies. 3 months later, his girlfriend dies. And the story behind his girlfriend dying was that she was actually with a young man in his car who she had been getting to know in college and was witnessing to, really, not like, getting together in a sense relationally, but she was witnessing to him. And he was obviously struggling with some mental illness. He was suicidal, and he tried to kill them both by driving his car at 130 miles an hour off an embankment. He lived and she died. And I remember I was in school. I was in high school. I was in 11th grade by the time that 3 month thing had changed over. And I remember I'm in the hallway, and a friend comes to me and he says, "Hey, so and so died." And I was just like, I actually, at first, just denial. I'm like, "What are you talking about? You're
Yeah.
confused," you know? And when it sank in that it had really happened, I remember for the first time, like, this deep, deep anger just in my heart. I was mad. I was just mad at the world. I was mad at God. I couldn't understand why this would happen right on the heels of another death. And it really put me for a loop. And really, there was a specific day that I was with some friends who were all Christians at the time. I was in a Pizza Hut, the old classic Pizza Hut, from the 90s.
Mhm.
And
Red roof. It's all
yeah,
pitched the
yeah.
same.
Oh yeah.
Arcade machine up next to the counter.
Yep. Sitting there with my friends, and I was in this internal dialogue of trying to wrestle through just what I was experiencing. And I came to a conclusion that if God was real, he was terrible. And I wanted nothing to do with this anymore. I stood up in this restaurant and I said to these people that were at the table, who were all Christian, "I'm done. I'm not doing this. If God's real, I'm not even necessarily sure he is real now. I was questioning everything. I'm done with it. If he's real, he's terrible. He's not good. All the things that people say, I just didn't believe it. I left. I remember I went out to my truck and was like swearing at the sky because I was just mad. This like deep rooted anger kind of took place in me.
Right.
Um, and so that was kind of like what led to a life for me without God. Um, and the story, if you want me to keep going, the story just
Yeah, please.
takes a spin really for me. Um, I think we all are looking for fulfillment, and we just look in all sorts of places for it. I
Yeah.
mean, it's everything, right? For a 17-year-old in 1999, it was I just wanted everyone to like me in high school. I wanted to be the center of attention. I was always kind of a funny kid or a funny guy, like jokes. I just make people laugh with the way I am. I'm kind of sarcastic, whatever that is. I just realized real quick I can make people like me if I'm funny. And I just started building this kind of persona around being funny. It fulfilled me for a while, but then that didn't work after a while. And so then I would find myself at parties and drinking and doing all the stuff that you do to try to find fulfillment. And it went that way for quite a few years, really. And I would just say it was kind of a slippery slope, right? Like I everything I tried didn't seem to work for very long. Whether it was, there was a period of time where I owned my own sound business. I was actually going to college for sound engineering, and I had bought all my own equipment, and I was doing sound for bands at bars like multiple
Hmm.
times a week, that kind of gig. And I just had always loved the music scene in my life. And of course, the music scene comes with a lot of things. I know you were in the entertainment scene
Yep.
for a long time, and you just know how that world can go, right? And
A lot of
so,
late night activity for sure.
yeah, I mean, late night. I remember early nights felt like 10 o'clock to me,
Yep.
getting ready to go out. Now I'm like 40 and 5 kids, and 10 o'clock is like I'm exhausted
Right.
and I need to go to bed. You know,
Mhm.
so that life definitely was a spiral for me. Um, and I just denied, God in every way that I could. And didn't want anything to do with him if he was real. Didn't want anything to do with anybody that was having anything to do with God or church, because it's just uncomfortable when you don't want to be around that kind of lifestyle. And so, yeah, I went that way for a few years and found myself um, really just more and more deeply depressed.
Mm.
Drinking was probably my biggest struggle and became a real struggle for me. I couldn't function throughout the day unless I was drinking. I would wake up in the morning and I would start drinking. I would go to classes in college. I would sneak stuff into classes to drink. And then at night, I've talked to people now, and they might share stories of alcohol and those things. And I don't remember a night that I didn't get blackout drunk. Like, to me,
Wow.
that was what drinking was. It was
Yeah.
like you drink till you don't remember,
Yeah. I was actually I wanted to kind of drill in a little bit on that.
Yeah.
Was that to just more numb yourself, or were you trying to sort of like chase away those thoughts that were there?
Yeah, I would say at the time I would not have been able to consciously understand that. I was not 18, 19. I would
Gotcha.
not have been able to consciously know what I was doing. But now on the other side, I know it was how I numbed my emotions, and it was how I stopped my brain from spiraling into
Mm.
all of the depressive things that I would think about, right? And so it was the only way I knew how to sleep. I knew
Mm.
that had happened at one point where I knew I can't sleep unless I drink a whole bunch.
Right. Otherwise, you're forced to face all those
Yeah,
things that you're
yeah.
not. Oh man.
That lie awakes, your brain's just moving, and I would think about people I lost. I don't know, it was everything. It wasn't I had some tragedies in my life, for sure, with some deaths, which everybody goes through. Pain is universal, I say. You can't really escape it. But there was a lot of reasons why life was still really good for me. And I think back now, like it didn't always doesn't always make sense when someone is depressed. Like I know that this has always given me kind of a compassion for people that are struggling in that way, because I know it doesn't always have to look logical. Someone can be depressed for different reasons. There's internal struggles we don't understand. It doesn't. You don't. You could look at someone's life, and on the outside they have money and they have the house and they have the car and they have the family, and still something can be broken on the inside that leads them to just really difficult places. And so anyway, that's a side note. But yeah, so for me, I was numbing the pain for sure. And I remember, actually, it's a funny part of my story is one of my friends, kind of from my Christian past, had messaged me and said, "Hey, I'd love to hang out this weekend." He was talking a few weeks ahead, and he was at a college maybe a couple hours from me. And so I was like, "Yeah, man, I'd love to see you and hang out." So I remember I drove over to see him for a weekend, and he's like, "Hey, we're gonna go and do something." I can't remember how he got me in the car. I'm not even sure like what the plan was, but I remember not knowing what the plan was, and he took me to a youth conference.
Hmm.
He totally tricked me into like going to this Christian youth conference, and I was like, "Why are you doing this to me? I don't want to deal with this." But I
Oh.
was I wasn't rude, and so I wasn't going to just like ditch, but I was frustrated at first. Well, I went to this conference, and actually, I know a moment happened there where God tried to get a hold of me, and I just didn't respond. I just
Hmm.
didn't. I remember it vividly after the fact, but I just didn't respond. I didn't want to. There was still all this pain inside me. I just was mad. Again, I would go back to saying I had this like deep angry root going on inside me, you know. So I went back to college after that, and I remember things got. This was right before Thanksgiving, and so I remember I went home for Thanksgiving. This was probably 2000 and this was 2002. Yeah, 2002. Sorry, 20 some years ago, right?
So this is like, how much time has transpired from that first fateful event of your friend passing away on Thanksgiving to like now where we are? Like how many years?
Probably 3.5 or 4 years.
Okay.
Yeah. And so I'm in college now, right? That happened in high school, went to college, all this stuff had kind of transpired over time. And, of course, you're doing everything that you shouldn't do with your life, as a person not caring about Christian values at the time, of course, and about Jesus, of course. And so, but after this like experience I had at this conference, I went back, and something had changed because it got worse for me. A part of it too was I went home for Thanksgiving, and it's always the anniversary of my friend's death. And this a part I didn't share was that he has an identical twin brother.
Oh man.
So it just I don't know how to explain how that feels, but so you've lost this person, but yet there's a person that looks just like them. you know, even to this day, 20 some years later, I'm very close with his brother as well.
That's
Still.
great.
And there are moments when he says something, makes a face in a way, and I see his brother, not him. It's super strange. So anyway, you have this kind of thing. It's a little bit of a part of the story. It's a little odd, but what had happened is because I was depressed, I didn't want to deal with that, the feelings of all those things. I would avoid that guy, his brother, at all costs. I just didn't want to be around him because you look like my friend who's dead. And but it was Thanksgiving, the anniversary of his death, and I remember I came home for Thanksgiving break. I went back to school, back to college. I get back to college, and I remember sitting in my bed and thinking to myself, I can't remember my break. Like, what did I do the whole time? I knew I was out every night partying, but I literally had like lapsed memory from how bad my drinking had gone. I knew, wow, this maybe I think it was like the first time I really started to have an internal realization, oh, maybe something's wrong, like really wrong. Maybe I've let this thing control me too much. But I also didn't really know how to stop, right? It just was like kind of like a realization and a thought, but it didn't change my actions. And so, I went on, um, like I was drinking, partying, just doing the thing, and came to Christmas time. I came home, and New Year's Eve day is this friend of mine's birthday, that had died, and his twin brother's birthday, obviously. And we had this tradition for years and years where we went skiing together. I was a big skier in college, downhill skiing, snow skiing, for those who might not be listening from cold areas of the country.
Right.
We live where there's lots of snow. And so he had called me, and I hadn't heard from him in maybe a couple of years. He had called me and left a message saying, "Hey, we're going to go skiing. I'd love for you to come." And I just was like, "No, I don't." I knew I didn't want to be around him. And so I said, "No, sorry, I can't make it. Thanks for inviting me." Then he called back and left another message that said, "Hey, well, if you can't come skiing, you should come to the New Year's Eve service at church." And I was like, "Well, that's a definite no. I'm not. I am not going to church." And he probably, I don't know how many times he called and hassled me, but he had wanted to see me. And so I finally, like, I don't know, I went to church to see him. Um, but kind of our New Year's Eve services back then, when I guess that was early 2000s, they would always do like a celebration of show pictures of the year before, and there was always punch and cookies. And so I went
Mhm.
for the punch and cookies part,
Sure.
and saw my friend, hugged him, um, asked if I was going to stay. I said, "No, I'm not staying." He tried to get me to stay. I wouldn't stay. And so I left, and I went and did what everybody does if you don't know Jesus on New Year's Eve, is you go to a party. So
Tie one on.
I went to a party, and it was in a friend of mine's basement. We're all home from college, that whole scene. And I remember that, like, vividly can remember, I was just really, really plastered. I had been drinking, but the whole time that I kept thinking to myself, this isn't working. This isn't working anymore. I'm usually having fun by now. I've drank all of this alcohol. Why is it not working? Why do I still feel what I'm feeling? And I was getting mad about it on the inside. And so what I can remember, because I don't remember the whole night, just being honest, I was sitting on this couch in this guy's basement, and this young lady that I was friends with in high school, she came over to me, and of course I was literally just the funny person all the time. So if you saw me like acting depressed, that would have been rare for them, even though I felt that way on the inside. I didn't act that way on the outside at all. But I must have had like a terrible look on my face or something. I remember sitting on a couch, just like realizing that none of this was working. I felt horrible on the inside. And this girl comes over and she puts her hand on my shoulder and she says, "Are you okay?" And I'm not really sure what happened, but I lost my mind.
Oh no.
Like, literally, I started yelling at everyone in the room. I'm yelling, screaming. The last thing I can remember of the night is I'm standing on the back of this guy's couch, and I'm yelling and pointing at everybody saying, "None of this works. It's not worth it. None of it matters." I was like, reading the Bible now, I think about Ecclesiastes, and you've got Solomon writing, and he's just saying, "Meaningless, meaningless. It's all meaningless." That was
It's vanity. This is vanity.
yes, it's like that was my moment of just thinking nothing really actually matters. And I have a couple of like glimpse memories from the rest of the night. What I do know is one of my good friends dragged me out of there, brought me to his house. I must have fell asleep in his basement. I woke up in the morning, probably early morning, 6, 7 o'clock, something like that. I was so sick and, hungover. But I woke up, and the only way I can describe it is like someone took a giant cookie cutter and stuck it through my chest, and I just felt like a hole. Like there was nothing on the inside. the emptiness I felt is hard to describe. And I know people that have struggled with depression and suicide and those things. When I've shared some of this story, it clicks home with them because I other than trying to explain all the details of why, you just feel hopeless and empty. And
Mhm.
it doesn't always make sense, but that's what I felt.
I
And I
know
laid
that
it.
that
Yeah,
feeling. It's like you have this blaring siren in the back of your head telling you exactly what you're doing wrong, and
yeah,
but you can't quite put your finger on why you're hearing that siren. Like I went through something similar when I was living my prodigal
yeah,
life in Nashville, and I had moved in with a girlfriend of mine at the time, and it was like the entire time, even though I should have been very excited because it was a new
right,
relationship and we were in love,
yeah,
the whole thing felt so tragically empty about it, and
mhm,
it felt like every single thing that we went through was just emotion, and we
yeah,
ended up splitting up like after 2 months of knowing each other,
yeah, yeah,
after making the huge mistake of moving in together. But that
yeah,
emptiness, I get what you mean when you say that. It's like, and you know that nothing else is going to fill it, but you still
right,
try to.
right. And that's what I kind of was coming to this conclusion that I was empty. I was realizing it. I felt I just felt terrible. Plus, I felt terrible just from the night before. I remember I rolled out of this guy's, basement, just like so hungover. I remember I had to wander around this neighborhood, like looking for my vehicle because I didn't even remember where I parked it. It's like early, early morning, and I got in my vehicle and I drove home to my parents' house. I remember I was pulling in my parents' house and I thought to myself, if my mom sees me, she's just gonna know because I don't know if you guys have moms like this, but my mom just always knew when something was wrong. I'm like, if she sees me, she's gonna know something is horribly wrong. I don't want to talk about this. I don't know what I'm feeling, but I'm lost in this moment. So I like ran into my house and hid away. It was so early, I don't even think they were awake yet. I remember I went up to my bedroom at the time and I laid there staring at the ceiling for multiple hours. And I kept asking this one question: what can I do that will make me feel different? What can I do? And I kept going through ideas like, well, maybe if there were more people that liked me, and I was kind of like, no, wow, lots of people like me. That's not going to work. Or like maybe if I made more money, and at the time I was actually making great money for a 20-year-old, right? And I thought, it's money. I mean, I can get more of that, but I don't know if that's going to make me feel better. And I was going through these things, and I just kept listing stuff and thinking, well, I've tried that, it's not working. I've tried that, it's not working. I've tried that, it's not working. And I finally came to this place where I thought, okay, this is all there is. And if this is all there is, I'm not going to keep doing this. And I'm a fairly radical person in my personality. Like I'd probably calm down a little bit because I'm 40. But I just decided then and there, it was like as black and white. It was like so obvious to me I should kill myself. That's literally what I thought. It was just obvious. I was like, yep, I'm not going to feel this way. I'm not going to go on drowning my sorrows. I know that that doesn't work. I was at least smart enough to even understand that. And so I just thought, all right, I'll come up with a plan. I thought of a plan right then and there for just a short period of time. I got dressed. I went down to leave to go out to my truck. I was literally going out to carry out this plan of suicide. And I got to the doorknob of my parents' house. And I always joke, it's like such a weird thought. But if you were growing up or my age around 2002, this has been 2003, because this is New Year's Day 2003, right? This is January 1, 2003. Um, I had the thought, well, I should check my AOL Instant Messenger. So I'm dating myself here, but AOL was like how you communicated with your friends then, right? We had started to have cell phones, but there was no texting yet,
Yeah, I
there
remember
was
the
none of
days.
that. And so AOL was like you had your buddy list is what it was, right? And there was, I think you could max out at 200 people on your buddy list. You couldn't even add more than that in those days. And so in my head, I thought, I should check my messages, because one of the things with AOL that was funny back then is you would leave like a funny away message, and people might leave you messages, and then you'd come back and see them later and respond to them. I'm like, I'm on my way out to kill myself, and my thought is, oh, I should check my AOL instant messages first. I I mean, maybe now I think to myself, maybe I was like, it was a last grasping chance. I think I might have thought maybe some of my friends from last night will have messaged me and
checking up on you,
encourage me, and maybe I was probably hoping something would convince me, not to do this, even though that really wasn't the thought that was happening at the moment. So, of course, it's 2003. So, still just coming out of the 90s. The only computer in our house was in my dad's office. So I go into my dad's office, our big desktop Hewlett Packard computer, and I click on the screen, and it says I have one message. And I remember my first thought was disappointment, because I had fed off of people liking me, for sure, right? Like, I lived for that reputation, people liking me type thing. And maybe I thought there'd be a bunch of messages of people worried about me because they saw me lose my mind at this party last night.
stand up on a couch and yell at them.
There was none from any of those people. I had one message, and it was from someone I didn't know. And so in those days, the way it worked is it would say the person's username. It would say, this person, whatever their username was, has sent you a message. Would you like to accept? So you had to accept it before you could see it. And the title of the username was this: alone but not forsaken. All one word. So the username, it says this: alone but not forsaken has messaged you. Would you like to accept? And I remember, I'm like, what the heck is this? So I click yes. And this is what it says. I'm sorry, 20 years later, it still gets me. It literally says this: run, run, run away from me, and you'll end up running right into me, Jesus. And I don't know how to describe to you what I felt in that moment. I can still feel it 20 years later. But at the moment that I was about to end my own life, Jesus was waiting there. And I saw it. I see this message from Jesus. And it wasn't Jesus' username. But here I have this message from someone I don't even know at my lowest moment. And Jesus is saying, you can run as fast as you want from me, but you will just run right into me. And I knew it was true. I knew it. I just crumbled into a mess. I'm in my dad's office. I had to like close his door and lock it because I was like sobbing like a little child. Like, I just was a mess. I'm crying in there. I was so loud that my mom came to the door and she's like, honey, are you okay in there? And I was like, leave me alone, mom. I was just a mess. I'm crying in my dad's office. And it's hard for me to describe to you what happened in me, but I just knew I had known God was real, but I had absolutely denied that he was good. And it came flooding back to me. He is good. And I didn't get any answers for all the difficult questions I had. I still didn't know why my friend had died or why his girlfriend had died. I didn't know why bad things happened in the world. I didn't get answers. But what happened was, at my lowest moment, Jesus was waiting for me and intervened in my own decisions to want to end my life, and showed me that he was right there. And so I knew in that moment, okay, this is it. I'm not going to live for anything else. I don't care what the world has to offer. I've tried those things. It hasn't worked out for me. It ended with me being depressed and, consumed by alcohol and reputation, all these things. And I just knew I want to live for only one thing. So from that moment on, things changed for me drastically. And I'll share another part of that story, but I do want to just say my life it changed for me, but it didn't like change like I didn't become a perfect person
Yeah.
immediately, just so people know. People are always like, oh wow, it must have been so many. I'm like, Oh no, man, it took me like 6 months to stop drinking. It took me a long time because it was more than social, right, for me. It had become a coping mechanism. It had become a companion really to my life, and it was not simple for me to stop. I did. About took about 6 months though. And of course, just all the stuff that goes with that. I'm drinking, I'm doing stupid things, right? You make dumb
Sure.
decisions. Now I had a conscience though. And it was like, like you were telling me about a friend of yours before, right? That was getting to know God, but was still struggling with drugs. I'm like, yeah, that's real life, man. It's like
Yeah.
you experience him, but there's still a process. There's a process for that change,
Yeah. Well, and like when you've done something habitually for so long, your brain, it builds the shortest
Yes,
path from the action center to the carrying out of that action inside your
yes,
mind, and it just becomes a subroutine. You don't even think about it. And to break out of that, you now have to build a whole new pathway to get around that and
yeah,
connect. And then you have to wait for that one you pre-carved to die out and stop
yes,
flickering to life. And like you said, that is a process. I know for a very close friend of mine, he used to have a very bad porn addiction. And
yeah,
for him, it took him months and months and months of just like ebbing it away slowly and slowly and slowly and shutting down that pathway he was going
yeah,
to. And finally, like he told me one day, he's like, dude, I get it. I'm porn free completely. And it was like you said, it was like a 6 month process
yeah.
for him.
That's actually I love that story because actually I think it was, oh man, it's probably been 15 years and I'm forgetting the doctor's name, but he does a series of things actually about pornography for men. And it was the first time I heard the science behind that. So you read in Romans 12, it talks about the renewing of our mind. But the science behind that is literally we need our mind renewed, that our brain has created pathways. And so for me, it was alcohol, right? If I even had a certain smell that would happen, it would trigger me to think about alcohol and I wanted a beer and I wanted this and so the same thing, we build these pathways in our mind because of habitual actions, and Jesus has to take time to undo them. And it's part of the process, which should make people feel a little bit better. Like you don't have to be perfect today. You just have to
Mhm.
be in the process of God renewing you. And that's all he really cares about.
Yeah, and it's why
So,
he makes such a intense play when he tells us, look, don't give sin a foothold, because he
yeah,
knows that this is what it's going to lead to. Like you guys, like, yes, you have the Holy Spirit in you, but you
yeah,
also have this fleshly vessel that is burdened by its own chemical responses within its own mind. Like,
yeah.
stay away from this.
Well, I mean, some of the scriptures are literally like, run away, like flee, right? It says,
Flee.
flee temptation. It's like run away as fast as you can because and he promises to give us, the ability to withstand temptation. But there's a reality that we have to run away and, you know, put new pathways in our mind. So anyway, I'll go back to that part of the story. So this thing happens. I'm now a mess. I'm crying. I'm gathering myself. I'm realizing God has just intervened when I was about to end my life, and it stuck with me. What happened for me, if I could sum it up in this, is I realized God cared about me. I didn't think He did before. I didn't think He was good. I thought He's too busy off doing whatever He's doing, and all these bad things happen to people because He doesn't care. And I realized He does care. He cares about me. I literally have evidence of what He just did for me. And so I'm on, AOL Instant Messenger, and I'm going, well, I don't think this is literally Jesus, even though it was signed Jesus. I'm like, I don't think this is actually his username. That would be cool, but it probably wasn't. So I started I messaged it, and it got rejected, which I'll tell you the backside of the story of why that happened. But I started asking around to people that I was still loosely connected to, in the church, thinking it's got to be someone from church that, I'm thinking who was someone at the party last night that saw this and messaged me. So I'm messaging around, and I find out that it's a friend that I had years previous, and it was actually a friend that was sitting at the Pizza Hut with me the day that I stood up and said, I don't want anything to do with this. I hadn't seen her in multiple years, 3.5+ years. I had not talked to her. I knew nothing about what was going on with her life. And in fact, she would have probably been like person number one to avoid because she was a zealous person for Jesus.
A little
And so, like,
intense.
yes, I just was like, I hadn't seen her for years. I thought to myself, oh my gosh. And so I find out it's her. And I think to myself, how does she know what's going on? How does she know? The thing I actually pictured, because this would maybe have been up her alley, is that she like went to a party on purpose to try to witness to people, about Jesus, and she saw me acting like a crazy person there,
There's the move.
and then there was this thing, and she sends it to me. So I'm still confused. I find out who it is, and I had been such good friends with her years before that I actually still remembered her phone number, because this is back in the day. Just remember when most of our phones were still attached to the walls at our parents' houses. So I remembered her parents' house number. And so I call it, and and she answered. And I remember she answers, and I'm on the other end of the phone, and I can't even say anything. I'm just such a mess. I'm like, I'm trying. I want to tell her what happened, but I'm just so emotional. I can't hardly get words out. And she's laughing on the other line. She literally is like, hi, did you get my message? She's like so nervous because she was like super embarrassed, like didn't want to talk to me about it. If she was telling the other side of the story, what she would say is that she had come home from Bible college. So she went off to Bible college because she loved Jesus, and was kind of a zealot, for him. And she goes to Bible college. She comes home from Bible college, and has this experience with one of her friends where she finds out that one of her friends was actually abused and raped, and it was like a horrible story. And she felt just so helpless. She was saying, "Here, God, I'm trying to give you my life, but I can't even help my friends. My friends are broken, they're lost. I don't know what to do." And she said she was kind of complaining to God in this prayerful way, maybe. She said she just felt like God, whispered in her mind the way that, we might hear him. And he just said, "Well, just do whatever I tell you to do." And she's like, she says, "I remember praying and God says, just do what I tell you to do." And I just thought, what a lame answer. What does that mean, dude? I'm just okay. And so the next morning, so she had this like experience where she's praying, saying, "God, I don't know what to do." And God tells her, "Just do whatever I tell you." The next morning, she wakes up and she was listening to this song by Jason Upton, and it was called "Run Baby Run." I don't know if you know who Jason Upton is, but he hasn't done much music in 20 years. He'd be in the Christian realm, and he wrote this song called "Run Baby Run." And one of the lines in it says, "Run, run, run away from me, and you'll end up running right into me." And she was listening to that music, and she felt like God said to her, "You need to send that to Greg Hurlbut." And she was like, "I'm not sending that to Greg Hurlbut. I haven't seen him in years. If I send, he's going to be offended if I send that." And she's arguing with herself, right, in her head, kind of arguing with God, like feels like she's supposed to send it, but then trying to convince herself, "No, I just made that up, and I'm not going to do that. He's going to be mad." So finally, she says, I got this courage to send it, so I type it out to you. I send it, and then she deleted her profile, so I could never message her back.
Oh my
Because
gosh.
she was so embarrassed, like thinking I'd be just so mad at her. So here I am now on the phone with her, and she's like, "Oh my God." And she said, "Well, I was going to college in like 2 days. I figured there's no way I'll ever see him." Right. Like that's what she figured. So she sent it in this like just kind of flippant, "Okay, I'm going to do what God says, but I don't really want to deal with it. I don't want to talk to the person." And so she sends it to me, and I call her, and the only words I can get out is like, "You don't even," I remember saying, "You don't even know." And we somehow made plans to meet up the next day. We met up. I shared the whole story with her. Just I was a mess, and really, for me to see the orchestration, and that's the best way I can say it. It was like an orchestration of God intervening in my life. And I look back at other moments where I was like, he probably tried to get me to notice him before that, which he does, right? But then he all the way to this place, the last moment, orchestrated this event where Jessica would send this message that would alter my life, that would save my life. And for those listening that don't know me, she became my wife. She was Jessica Perry before, and now she's Jessica Hurlbut. And again, that wasn't ever a thing in that moment. In fact, we didn't see each other for quite a few months because she was in college in Florida, and I would message her when I was struggling, and because I was struggling big time, just still trying to get out of this lifestyle. And somewhere in there, she invited me to come to Florida to check out their college. It was an Assemblies of God college. I went down. I just, at that point, was definitely just saying, okay, God, whatever you want, you tell me. If it's clear, I'll do it. And he made it pretty clear. I felt like I was supposed to go to college. I went to college there. Of course, now it's 20 years later. We got married a little over a year after that, which was kind of quick in some ways. But I look back now, 20 years, and I just think, like, only God can make up stories like this. Like, he orchestrates these events, and I'm a free will guy. I don't want to get into a huge debate on the sovereignty of God, but I totally believe in free will, meaning that we are partners with God in his work. And I do believe there's a place where if Jessica hadn't sent that, I could be dead. And the events of my life, and now I have children, and I pastor a church with multiple locations, and the people that I get to be a part of seeing Jesus affect their life. Like, to imagine that could all have not ever happened simply because one person decided to send a small message that said, run, run, run away from me. You'll end up running right into me. Like, how life-changing that was, not just for me, but for all of those that have had the ripple effect of that. I think that's what's so beautiful about God. And my realization now, I think probably my favorite thing is this. I say it like this: God doesn't waste anything.
Mm-hmm.
Now, he doesn't cause all the things. I don't think he causes the death and destruction and all these things. But I'll tell you what, he doesn't waste them either. Even if they happen, he will use them and turn them. And he's always drawing on people's hearts. And there's always the free will part, I always say this: there's a free will. I totally believe in free will. I just believe God does probably 99.99% of the work. And we got to do that 0.01%. Got to lean into him in some way. But yeah, so that's my story of God rescuing my life. And I really think rescue is the right word. So
that's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. So many different things. Like you said, I'm willing to bet that there were probably a million things that he was trying to get your attention with.
Yeah.
You remind me a lot of even myself when I was having my own tryst with the world, where I remember praying to God, because I had grown up in the church as well.
Yeah.
And it felt like when I was up until about age 14, when I was very active in the church, I felt like I was just hearing him speak into my heart every single day. And then I stepped away from that faith for a number of years as well. And I was no longer hearing him. You still get those impressions of the Holy Spirit places in your heart. And actually, in a testimony I recently gave, I said, once the Holy Spirit has taken up residence inside of you, you can still sin, and it feels good for a second, but immediately following that second, the realization that you've stepped away from goodness and you've shifted your life towards chaos, it gnaws away at you like these intense hunger pangs. You can no longer derive joy from that.
I think I listened to your testimony, and I remember when you said that, I said, that is exactly how I felt those 3.5 years. See, I had known God to a degree, and it was like all the stuff that maybe should have at least lasted longer was never fulfilling. It gnawed away at me. So part of it, I totally believe, is like the torment of knowing I wasn't living a life I was designed for. Right.
Mm-hmm. And the Bible makes it pretty clear that, like, us as people, we reserve more torment for us than even hell has to offer. And it's typically because of our disallowing our Heavenly Father to just minister to us. And like you said, with the way you that Jessica had been spoken to was, look, just do what I tell you to do.
Right.
And the implicit promise there is it's gonna work out.
Yeah.
Just do what I tell you to do. And I remember getting to that point myself where, because I hadn't heard him speak for so long, I said, look, okay, I don't know what you want me to do. I'm frustrated and I'm exhausted here. So if you're going to speak to me, then hit me over the head with it like a sledgehammer. Don't be
Yeah. Yeah.
subtle whatsoever. And it took me getting out of that awful relationship, being homeless for a week and a half, having my car get totaled, then crashing my
Yeah.
best friend's car on the way back home from work. And then I end up like in the middle of it, reaching up to touch rock bottom, and I get message from my now wife just out of nowhere on Facebook. And it was like, hey, I hear you into voice acting. That sounds like a fun job to do. Could you help me get started? And I was like, who is this? And yeah, I won't get into that whole story, but that ballooned very much the same way.
That's
Um,
incredible.
but no, thank you again so much for
Yeah, of
sharing.
course.
To those of you folks out there that are in a similar place or have been in a similar place, it is not for no reason that you're going through what you're going through, especially when it comes to those dark nights of the soul. Chuck Missler, he was a brilliant Bible scholar, passed away back in 2018. His wife actually wrote a book. It was called God in the Night Seasons.
Mm.
And it was all about those moments where we feel that we're so distant from him, or we feel like he's not there. And so just as a way of encouragement, folks, he is always there.
Yeah.
And while God cannot be the perpetrator of evil, because he is love, he is good, because he is in effect the starter of all things, his invisible hand is there present in our pain. But we have to know that it's also for our everlasting good, that it is there present. And if Romans 8:28 has anything to say on the matter, it's that all things he maketh to work out for the good, for those to whom are the called according to his purpose.
Yeah.
And if you're part of the Christian fold, you are indeed called. You have a purpose, and like you said, he does not waste anything.
Yeah. That'd be my encouragement. Similarly, is he's seeking after us. He's orchestrating events for us. And there's just a place where we have to recognize and respond to that. And I don't care where you're at with God, if you don't believe he's real at all, or if maybe you've experienced God, but then you're not sure, like me, if he's good or if he is who he says he is. I would say this: God's not trying to hide his goodness from you. He's not trying to hide himself from you. I think if someone really has a heart to know the truth and to find the truth, then he'll show it to you. I just believe that.
That's awesome. Since taking up the service of the Lord,
Mm-hmm.
and it's been, has it been like 20 years now that you've actually been in ministry, or
Probably not
somewhere
quite
thereabouts?
20 in ministry. It's probably been like 18.
Okay.
Yeah.
So since going to Bible college, marrying Jess, and then stepping into ministry, what, if any, significant challenges have you had to face as a Christian who is actually strong in their faith now?
I would say it's funny. I shouldn't say it's funny. It's a similar struggle that I had even from the story I just shared, and this would be the word over it: disillusionment. Meaning, I have continued at times in my life to struggle when things get really hard. And so, another part of my story that I don't have to share completely here, but I have two biological special needs kids who are severely autistic. They're disabled and will need care for the rest of their lives. Whether it's them living with us or they'll be in a care facility maybe at some point. And dealing with that, like it was another thing in my life where I had an expectation of how things were going to go in life, and then the expectation gets broken. And I talked about this kind of deep-seated root of anger in me. It's been something I've been dealing with for a long time. Even when I came back to God, I don't think I fully dealt with the anger and frustration for what I felt was when things were wrong, like, oh, that shouldn't happen, right? Almost like an
Mhm.
injustice thing. And so when that would happen to me, especially now that I'm serving God, I'm a pastor, I'm doing all the right things, and yet I have two biological children that are special needs, and wrap your theology around how that works. Other than I can say it rains on the just and the unjust. I don't know what else. I would say that for me, even doctrinally and things, I have to be able to shrug my shoulders and say, I don't understand why or how, but I believe in his goodness. And so I've
Mhm.
had seasons of what I would call disillusionment, where I would come to this place of a struggle where something was hard for me, especially with my kids now, and it would just sit inside me, and it would cause me when. And the word disillusionment just means this: you don't see clearly, right? It's now like you're looking through watery lenses all the time, and so here I am, and at that point I was a solid Christian. Obviously, I'm following God. I'm a leader in our church, and I would say this: I knew how to do the right thing, and so I would just do the next right thing, whatever it was. I did the right thing. I knew the right choice. I even knew the right things about God. But my experience was really loud in that season, meaning the disillusionment was loud and like my hurt was loud. And so I'd have to walk through these seasons. And I've probably had multiple ones. I mean, I'd like to not think about how many I've probably had. I had a recent one last year. We had it's a long story, but a miscarriage, and it was
Mm.
devastating for multiple reasons. And there was all these things surrounding it where we had this hopefulness of another child. Even after I wasn't even there. I didn't want more children, and then God kind of brought this thing back around where maybe we would, and then bizarrely we get pregnant, like in not expected, and then there's a miscarriage, and so there's like this like roller coaster of disillusionment, and I think it's probably true for almost everybody. You go through these seasons, um, but how do you walk through them, and how do you come through the other side? For me, I would just say you have to stay close to Jesus, and you have to be able to say, I don't understand, and that's okay.
Oh, that right there, that is so tantamount. Because I remember, well, this is shortly before I had gone through a cancellation of my career in Texas, and I remember
Yeah,
getting to this kind of apex point within entertainment, and I thought, I feel like I have conquered all my battles. I have fought and won all my battles. The worst thing that's going to happen now is maybe there'll be a weird hiccup at like a Thanksgiving dinner where like crazy Uncle Michael's going to go off the deep end on some fringe topic, and we'll be like, all
right.
right, yeah, yeah, glad we can only do this once a year.
Yeah,
But now living in northern New York, it is interesting how the seasons do change, how it's like
yeah,
you conquer one thing, if indeed you have it on the inside of you to have that perseverance and actually run your race so that you win the
hmm,
race. And it's like once you finish one thing, it feels almost like in some continuing seasons it was training you for just the immediate next thing, or
yeah,
it comes way down the road and you realize that somehow your patience has been stretched and you now
yeah.
have way more patience inside of you for X, Y, or Z, or you were given some solution back there which you didn't know how to apply in the moment, but now it's presented perfectly where you
Yeah.
can provide it in a situation. um
Well, it's funny because you read the scriptures, you read the stories, and Joseph and
oh, I
Abraham
was thinking of
and
him when you were
David,
talking. Yeah.
like all of these stories, and all of their lives are complicated and difficult, and they get this promise like way early on about the call of God on their life, but then it's like this crazy long season of it not happening or things going the opposite. And we read those stories and we're always like, wow, they're so incredible, but then we think we're the exception. Oh, well, that doesn't have to happen to me. I don't have to wait 20 years for God to work in my life. I don't have to go through the pit where my brothers throw, or the prison where I'm falsely accused. I don't have to go through that stuff. But yet somehow we think we're the exception. But the truth is, I mean, there's scriptures, and I don't want to preach about suffering, but we love to avoid the scriptures that talk about suffering. I mean, literally in Romans, I think it's 6, where he talks about us being included in the family of God. It says we're heirs to his glory, which means we're also heirs to his suffering. And I'm like, I wish it just stopped one line before, but we're on this side of the life in the kingdom of God, right? We know there's a kingdom coming one day, and all the pain will be gone, and all that hardness will be over in a sense. But on this side of it, there's something about joining Jesus in his suffering that, especially as Western Christian Americans, we want to do everything to avoid. And it causes us to get disillusioned when something is hard. And we're just saying, well, shouldn't it be this way? But it just is the way life really is. And you have to be able to shrug your shoulders to a degree and go, I don't get it, but I'm still here, and I know God is good. I know he's good to me. And for me, like, sharing my testimony is me clinging to his goodness. It's me going, even though I might not understand this moment in my life, I can go back to that moment, and I know God was waiting to rescue me. And I can cling to that and say, nothing's going to change my mind on his goodness, because I know that story. And many, many more since then too,
Yeah, I love the quote. I cannot remember the person who said it, but it's, I may not be all that I want to be, but thank God I'm not what I used to be.
So true. Yes.
I cleave to that one. And you brought up a great point there about joining God in his suffering, because we're told even in Romans 6 that we've not just been united with God in his death, but also united in his resurrection.
Yes.
But then Paul goes on to say, and we are destined to reign with Christ, provided that we suffer with him.
Yes.
So it's like, if you want training for reigning, then get ready for some suffering.
We just want to skip those scriptures, though, don't we?
Yep, we sure do. It's like a lot of people, they like to just say, oh yeah, he works everything for the good of those who love him, but then they leave out the who are also called according to his purpose. Well, his purpose might involve some suffering. Well, hey, again, thank you so much, folks who have been listening tonight. I hope you have enjoyed this conversation. Greg sharing his testimony there. Greg, do you have anything that you'd like to plug?
Well, if there's anything I wanted to plug, so I guess I'll just share with you. My wife and I, we do some things online. My wife is actually really the star on Instagram. You could check her out, jessicahurlbut.com. But also we do a podcast, and it's really encouraging for parents. So I just shared briefly. It's not my whole story, it's not my original testimony, but it is my testimony in my life right now, which is God's goodness in the midst of parenting kids with special needs. And so we have a parenting podcast called Full Spectrum Parent, and it's really easy to find on Apple Podcasts. You can type in Christian parenting, and we'll be one of the top 5 that are up there. It's been a fantastic thing to do. Yeah, there's my wife. She has a book. I would even say this is called Unlimited Motherhood, but I'd encourage anybody to read it. It's just 12 things that we know like kind of feel like they limit us, but just her niche market has been mothers. And so but I know lots of guys that have even read the book. So yeah, there's the podcast. You can find an Apple Podcast or Spotify or anywhere. But yeah, we'd love to have you join in and listen. We just talk real plainly about what it means to be a parent. Oh, we got to change that picture. I haven't seen that one in a while. That's when I still wear glasses.
It's good. Look at that good strong jawline there.
I got eye surgery, and so I haven't worn glasses in about a year. But yeah, feel free to find that on Apple Podcasts. Yep.
Yeah, I'll have all the links down below inside our description box here, folks. Awesome. And then for those of you who enjoy the work that I do and you feel so inclined, please consider following me on this page. Give me a follow over on Rumble as well. In case I ever get pulled off of YouTube, I will still be carrying out the fight over there as long as free speech is still protected. And if you like the work that I do and you feel so inclined, you want to donate to the cause, you can pop on over, join my locals page there. Donors all get access to PDFs of all my research with endnotes included, and your support is greatly appreciated. Again, you'll find all the links in the description box down below. Again, this has been awesome. Greg, please, the final word is yours tonight.
Well, thanks so much for letting me come on and share my story. I just would want to remind you again, no matter who you are out there, if you know Jesus, if he has impacted your life, remember that Revelation 12 scripture, that is a weapon. Your story is a weapon, and it helps free other people, it helps bring other people hope. Share your story wherever you can.
Awesome. Be blessed and be a blessing, y'all. Thanks for tuning in.